The shrill sound of the phone cuts through the silence of the room. Emily, 29, already knows the number flashing on the screen, and a wave of anxiety washes over her. It's her mother. Again. She closes her eyes for a moment, trying to calm her breathing before answering. The call is never just a casual conversation. There's always something more. A disguised criticism, a veiled demand, or the old guilt tactic that Emily knows so well but can never seem to avoid. "Hi honey, why didn't you call me yesterday? I was already worried." Her mother's voice sounds sweet, but Emily feels the weight of each word, as if the air around her becomes heavier. She tries to explain, but any justification is immediately dismissed. "You always have an excuse, don't you? You never think about me. After everything I've done for you?" Emily's stomach turns. There she is again, trapped in the cycle of manipulation. For years she tried to be the perfect daughter, but it was never enough. Everything Emily did seemed to be just another reason for criticism, another reminder of how she should be grateful. She listens to her mother continue, now in a more accusatory tone. The guilt begins to grow inside her as always. As she listens, Emily looks out the window, the distant horizon offering an illusion of freedom. Why is it so hard to walk away? She's tried before, but each attempt was followed by an unbearable feeling of abandonment and guilt. Something inside her still craves her mother's approval, even knowing it will never come. The call ends with a disguised warning, "I don't know what I'd do without you, honey." Emily hangs up, feeling the weight of the words. Her mind fills with conflicting thoughts. She wants to distance herself, set boundaries, but how? The fear of hurting her mother is almost as strong as the desire to break free. That night, as she tries to sleep, Emily makes a decision. She will no longer be a hostage to this relationship. But she knows it won't be easy. The road to emotional freedom seems distant, and the guilt is already creeping into her thoughts. Tomorrow she will begin to plan how to break this cycle, but for now, the weight of her decision keeps her awake. The next morning, Emily wakes up with a heavy head. The thoughts from the night before still echo in her mind. The desire to distance herself from her mother is still there, but along with it, the guilt is ready to attack. She makes a cup of coffee, trying to clear her mind, but instead, the memories start to surface, like a movie she's seen so many times before. Emily remembers her childhood, how everything seemed perfect to others. Her mother was seen as a strong woman, admired by the community. But at home it was different. She always had to be the exemplary daughter, without mistakes, without questioning. The memories are vivid. One random afternoon when Emily, at just 7 years old, was painting a picture with all the colors she loved. Her mother looked over her shoulder, grimaced, and coldly said, "Do you really think this is pretty?" What a disappointment. Emily still feels the tightness in her chest when she recalls those words. The approval she had sought since she was little never came. At school, she tried to be the best student, hoping that one day her mother would praise her. But there was always something wrong, something to be criticized. If she got a good grade, it was because she was just doing her duty. If she made any mistake, no matter how small, she received cold silence or harsh reprimands. These memories pile up, one after the other, like bricks in a wall that Emily has been trying to tear down for years. She sees herself, younger, questioning her own ability to be loved. What was wrong with her? Why was she never enough? Her mother's manipulation had shaped her self-esteem, molding a young woman who, on the outside, seemed strong but inside carried deep scars. Now, at 29, she understands better what her mother did, but it's still hard to break free from this pattern. Her mother was never openly cruel. On the contrary, her words were subtle, filled with a poison disguised as concern. She manipulated masterfully, making Emily believe that all the love she could receive was conditional upon her exemplary behavior. Amidst these memories, a new thought begins to emerge. Does she really need this conditional love? Could life be different? The previous week, a friend had mentioned therapy, and for the first time, Emily considered the possibility of seeking professional help. Maybe, with someone to guide her, she could finally understand how to break free from this cycle of manipulation. As these ideas take shape, Emily decides she's going to try. The change seems terrifying, but the memories of the past show that if she doesn't do something now, she'll remain trapped in the same suffering. She stands up from the table, picks up the phone, and schedules her first session with a therapist. Now, the question remains whether this first step will be the beginning of her liberation or just another failed attempt to escape. The future is still uncertain, but Emily feels something different this time. For the first time, there's a real possibility that she might, in fact, find her own voice. The following weeks are an emotional roller coaster for Emily. Each therapy session seems to open new wounds, but also illuminates paths she never imagined walking. Her therapist helps her see patterns Emily had never clearly noticed before. The guilt, the fear, the uncontrollable desire to please. Everything now makes more sense. She starts to understand that it's not selfish to want distance from a relationship that suffocates her. But knowing this and feeling it are very different things. Her mother, however, notices the changes. Emily's daily calls become less frequent, and when they are answered, they are shorter. Fewer explanations, fewer excuses. At first, her mother just comments with a slight tone of disapproval. "You're different, Emily. You've been so busy lately, have you forgotten about your mother?" Emily tries not to react, trying to remember her therapist's words. Her behavior is predictable, it's not your responsibility to manage her emotions. But her mother's words always find a way to penetrate her defenses. Soon, the subtle criticisms evolve into something darker. "Don't you think you're abandoning me?" her mother asks one night, her voice filled with victimhood. "After everything I've done for you, is this how you treat me? Who else is going to take care of me? I only have you, Emily." These words cut like knives through Emily's chest. She feels the guilt flood her, a tide she can barely hold back. The familiar cycle of emotional blackmail begins to unfold before her eyes. But this time, Emily is more prepared. She knew this moment would come. The tension at home rises. Her mother becomes more insistent, calling multiple times a day, leaving long messages full of accusations when Emily doesn't answer. "Are you going to leave me alone? What if I need something? You're never available anymore. I don't know what I did to deserve this from you, my own daughter." The tone is desperate, full of dramatization, and Emily feels the weight of these words piling up like stones on her shoulders. Meanwhile, Emily fights an internal battle. Every conversation with her mother becomes a minefield, full of emotional traps. On one hand, the guilt feels suffocating, pulling her back into the family's control. On the other, the desire to break free and breathe on her own is growing stronger. She wants to believe that she can have a life without this constant weight, but the fear of her mother's reaction is paralyzing. Then, something unexpected happens. An invitation to an important work event comes up, something that could boost her career and that she has been waiting for years. Emily feels excited and ready to take this next professional step. However, when her mother learns about the invitation, she reacts bitterly. "Are you really going to leave me alone to go to this party? What if I need you? Have you thought about that? What will happen to me?" The conflict is inevitable. Emily finds herself torn between the usual obligation, being available for her mother, and the desire to achieve something for herself. For the first time, the choice seems clearer, but that doesn't make it any less painful. Emily knows that if she gives in, she will lose an important part of her identity and reinforce the control her mother has always held. But if she goes to the event, she will face her mother's emotional fury and all the consequences that will follow. The dilemma is cruel and the choice difficult. That night, Emily looks at the event invitation and then at the phone, where yet another voicemail from her mother waits to be heard. She takes a deep breath, knowing a decision must be made. The work event is a resounding success. Emily stands out, earns praise, and feels a joy she hasn't experienced in a long time. But deep down, the thought of her mother continues to haunt her. During the party, her phone buzzes multiple times with missed calls and messages. Emily tries to ignore them, but the guilt never fully leaves her. The next morning, when Emily returns home, she finds her mother waiting for her. Her face is pale and her eyes are swollen, a sign of a night spent crying. Emily braces herself for another emotional confrontation, but nothing could have prepared her for what's coming. "You can't just leave me like that," her mother begins, her voice thick with a suffering that Emily can no longer ignore. "I was alone all night and you didn't even call to check on me. I thought you cared more." Emily feels a mix of anger and sadness. She knew her mother would try to manipulate the situation, but now she's more determined than ever to face the reality. "Mom, I know you're hurt, but I need you to understand that I have my own life too. I can't keep sacrificing my future to cater to all your emotional needs." Her mother looks at her with disbelief and pain, as if hearing the greatest betrayal. "So that's it? You're choosing your career over me? My whole life has been dedicated to raising you, and this is how you repay me?" Emily takes a deep breath, holding back tears. She tries to stay calm, knowing the confrontation is inevitable and necessary. "It's not about choosing between you and my career. It's about finding balance. I need space to grow and to be who I really am. That doesn't mean I don't care about you, but I can't keep living just to meet your expectations." The confrontation reaches a critical point. Her mother, unable to accept Emily's new behavior, starts attacking, bringing up old secrets and criticisms Emily had tried to forget. "You've always been ungrateful, never recognized everything I did for you. Now, you think you can just abandon me and live your life as if I don't exist?" Emily feels crushed by the intensity of her mother's words, but for the first time she doesn't let it get to her. She knows she has to stand firm. In a steady tone she replies, "I'm not abandoning you. I'm trying to find a way to live without constantly being overwhelmed by your need for control. If you really care about me, you'll understand that this is necessary for my well-being." The silence that follows is heavy. In a final act of desperation, her mother tries one last tactic. "If you really loved me, you would do what I want. But if that's how you feel, maybe it's better if I distance myself too." Emily feels a deep pain hearing this, but she doesn't let the guilt win. She knows that if she doesn't set boundaries now, the manipulation will never stop. "I hope that, in time, we can find a way to have a relationship that works for both of us. But for now, I need time and space to take care of myself and to find myself." Her mother leaves, leaving Emily alone with her conflicting emotions. The weight of her decision falls heavily on her, and the loneliness is palpable. But even in the midst of the pain, Emily feels a new strength. She understands that the path to emotional freedom is difficult, but she is willing to walk it. The future is still uncertain, but she is ready to face the next challenge in her journey of self-discovery and liberation. The weeks pass slowly after the confrontation. Emily feels the impact of the decisions she made. The absence of her mother in her life brings a mix of relief and sadness. For the first time, she has space to breathe and reflect on what it truly means for her to have a life of her own. Emily begins to focus more on her career and personal interests, finding joy in things she had set aside. Therapy continues to help her process her emotions and strengthen her self-esteem. The pain of separation still lingers, but it is now accompanied by a growing sense of self-awareness and fulfillment. She starts attending support groups, where she meets others who have gone through similar experiences. These interactions help her see that she is not alone and strengthen her commitment to her own healing. Emily makes new friends, people who support and encourage her growth. Each small victory makes her feel stronger and more confident in her decision. However, the past is not easily forgotten. The guilt, though diminished, still appears at unexpected moments. Emily finds ways to cope with it, learning to recognize those feelings without letting them control her. She understands that guilt is part of the recovery process but should not dictate her actions. One day, Emily decides to try to re-establish some kind of contact with her mother, not to return to the old dynamic, but to offer a bridge for reconciliation. She writes a letter, expressing her feelings and the hope that her mother might also seek help if she is willing. The letter is carefully written, filled with honesty and empathy, but also with clear boundaries. Her mother's response is a mix of anger and sadness. She is still not ready to accept the changes, but Emily understands that she cannot force a change her mother is not willing to face. She decides to keep limited contact, focusing on protecting her own well-being while leaving the door open for a possible future reconciliation. Emily is learning to live with her scars, but also to celebrate them as part of her journey. She discovers that, even with the wounds of the past, it is possible to build a new and healthier future. The path is filled with challenges, but she walks it with a new perspective and a strength she didn't know she had. In the end, Emily finds herself in a place where the suffering of the past no longer defines her. She has found a balance between taking care of herself and keeping space for a potential reconciliation. Her life is now marked by choices that reflect her true self, and not just the desire to please or meet the expectations of others. The future remains uncertain, but Emily faces it with renewed hope and the confidence that her journey of self-discovery and liberation is just beginning. She learns that true emotional freedom comes from within, and that by freeing herself from the past, she can finally embrace a future where her own voice is the most important.